This is an unofficial video supporting Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. Hello my fellow Canadians, thank you for taking the time to view this series of videos in order to gain understanding and better information so you may best cast your ballot this October for the sake of Canada today and onwards into the future. Additional resources such as more videos, policy comparison charts, business cards to direct voters to those resources, conversation starting t-shirts, links to key PPC Maxime Bernier social media accounts, as well as non-controlled news outlets, and other critical social media accounts can be found at canadiansforppc.blogspot.com. Before we begin, keep in mind, the average riding has between 60 to 80,000 electors in it, that's people that can vote. There's going to be roughly 30 to 35,000 separate dwellings or doors to knock on. This means you'll have to convince roughly 40,000 people to vote for the PPC. But we can win. If all Canadians know our message and the state of the current Canadian political parties, we will win. The choice becomes obvious. Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada are truly, undeniably, the only option for this nation's future. Know and believe that we can win. First off, we already covered in an earlier video that logically, based on where PPC supporters came from, certain percentages from each party, if everyone knew the message and the truth, that ratio of all voters would move to the PPC and we'd win a small government of 31%. Add to that half of non-voters who've given up on the corrupt system, whom we'll also reach with our message, and that's 16% more, nearly giving the party a majority. But honestly, this platform makes so much sense, and the corruption in other parties is so bad, I could see the People's Party of Canada getting 55% if everyone just got out there and told others. And here's how that will happen. In the first week, 10 supporters go door knock, and they door knock 100 doors each, and they cultivate many new supporters and at least 4 others to follow in their footsteps, train up, and door knock 100 doors themselves the following week. So by the end of week 1, you have 40 new door-knocking recruits, never mind all the new supporters or people curious about the party, and now investigating whether or not to support. Those 40 go out and do the same, each recruiting and training at least 4. That's now 160 people in the second week. By the end of the third, you have 640. At the end of the fourth, you have 2,560. After the 5th week, you have 10,240. They go out and do the same during the 6th week. Not necessarily having to recruit and train door knockers, but only make solid PPC supporting voters. That's 40,960 that week. Add that number from that week to all the other weeks of training, plus your original 10, and by voting day, you have 54,610 people who are solid PPC supporters. And everyone else in those prior weeks didn't even have to keep door knocking. They could have stopped and took on simpler roles, or kept going. That's how exponential growth and the wave works in our favor. We just have to get the word out. This video's topics: fear shouldn't stop you, steps for door knocking, my experience, connect the volunteer, train to replicate, an example, some final thoughts, and a conclusion. Fear shouldn't stop you. I know door knocking, public speaking with strangers, even one-on-one, can all sound daunting. But fear, although it's meant to keep us safe from real threats, can also rule us and keep us from doing what is right. Often we allow ourselves to be anxious or fearful of a lie that doesn't exist. Seriously, do you think if you fumble over words at a stranger's door, they're going to laugh at you? Pull out a cell phone and videotape you for YouTube? No, they won't. In fact, I think it would be very endearing to see someone who cares so much that they're out nervously trying to communicate a message about the election to others. That's authentic. And there's nearly zero chance someone is going to get angry and harm you. Maybe 1 in a million, if that. When people start getting really angry, you just say thank you for your time and walk away. There's nothing to be afraid of. And even if there was, think of what's at stake if we allow fear to rule us. A few times now in speeches, I've heard PPC MP candidate Salim Mansour liken our mission to storming the beaches of Normandy. As a veteran, I take no offense because I see the danger we're facing as a nation, and I know it's going to take courage and action to oppose it. American President Franklin D. Roosevelt apparently once said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear." Another poignant quote is by Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That is exactly the situation we find ourselves in. Steps for door knocking. Be comfortable and presentable to some degree. Even though you're doing this as a concerned Canadian trying to share critical information, whether you're doing this under the guidance of your electoral district association, also known as an EDA, or on your own, you're representing the People's Party of Canada to some extent. You don't want to turn people off of the only party worth voting for, right? First off, your EDA likely has a way of how they want this done. If you've partnered with your EDA and received any training, you've likely been told things like, be positive, don't debate at the door, work in teams of two so that you A, always have a witness if something goes wrong, and B, you have another mind to think with you. Pair up male and female because apparently men answering a door will be more polite when there is a woman, and a woman answering a door will be more friendly if there is a man. You've probably also been instructed to open the conversation with a very natural, hello, I'm so-and-so, and I'm here on behalf of MP What's-His-Name of Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. Some good advice you'll have been given is to introduce 3 main issues most likely cared about by your riding and to have some familiarity with the party's policies to speak on them. Example, pipelines, equalization, and corporate welfare. You'll likely be told to have everything summarized in a 20-second elevator pitch. This helps to get everything you want said out before they can resist thanks to how it flows so naturally, and it keeps the time at the door reduced so you can hit more doors in a night. Trying to get donations will likely also be suggested, because campaigning does cost something. It doesn't have to cost much, but it's not free. A modest grassroots campaign will run between $15,000 and $21,000. You might hear people talking about $150,000, but that's if people are putting up billboards, doing TV ads, the whole 9 yards. It's not necessary whatsoever, as long as everyone is sharing, training, and replicating. Another good idea is having a team of people in a neighborhood with a follow-up car stocked with yard signs or other merch, membership forms, extra door hangers, etc. And of course, if your MP candidate is out with you, that's even better because it's always best practice to refer everything back to your candidate when you don't know the answer or it's more complicated. And best of all, people get to meet the candidate and know this person is involved. This is all ideal, and I'm glad we covered that. You'll have a heads up if and when you go help your EDA, and I think that you should. It's good camaraderie, and the people in that team may at times feel undermanned, so they could use your help. What I'm proposing is a little less orthodox, and if the above isn't working, and we'll talk about why shortly, there's another option that will garner results. Connect with the voter. The first reality is you are talking with a human being, a fellow Canadian. Why? Because you're trying to sell them a party membership? No. Because you are concerned about the fate of this nation and the direction it's headed, and you thankfully have stumbled upon a solution. A party about freedom through smaller government, and a reset to a very old and crooked and broken political establishment. A draining of the swamp is what you're offering. So you want to develop a quick but authentic connection with this person. This is where you might start off with your standard introductions, stating you're speaking on behalf of the party. Hi there, I'm John, and I'm going around the neighborhood on behalf of candidate so-and-so who's running for the People's Party of Canada under Maxime Bernier. They would like to know what issues are most important to you for the election this year. You say they, so the individual associates this care and concern with Bernier and your candidate and the party. But here's the harsh reality. Our nation's citizens have been conditioned for the last several months, especially recently with this billboard attack you've already heard of, so that Canadians associate the name Maxime Bernier and People's Party with racism and bigotry and any evil thing, just as long as it means the conversation shuts down and the establishment parties of old get to keep on winning. How do you deal with that? We'll get to that shortly. So they tell you the issues that matter most to them, and this is when you should be writing them down on a clipboard. Once it's written down, it serves as the heading for a poll. As more people say the same thing, you tally up more ticks. At the end of the night, you now have an idea of percentages of what matters to your constituents, and at some point, you can relay your findings to the EDA. Third thing is time. If you can do all this in under 2 minutes, great. When I go out, I can have some good conversations that are quick, but most are closer to 4 or 5 minutes. I don't want people to think I'm in a hurry to get away from them, and it can seem disingenuous if what you're really thinking about is how many doors you can get to. I would rather be out for 2 hours or 120 minutes and have 24 5-minute conversations that are excellent than 60 that appear superficial. If I have better conversations, I'm going to be able to connect with people and help them see the reality of what's going on. This is not just another typical political election where everyone gives it a go, has a swell time, but in the end, every party has Canada's best interests at heart, so it doesn't matter who wins. If you've watched through all these videos, you know that is a lie. Political parties don't have Canada and Canadians' best interests at heart. Hence, why we need to get in a party that will buck the old system. This also means in 3 or 4 evenings where I talk to nearly 100 people, I will likely find not just 4 people totally convinced that this is the party for our future, so they will be willing to fight for our country by training to do what I did for them, doorknock and make other recruits, but I'll probably have 10 willing to sacrifice at least 1 or 2 weeks of evenings. And if you think back to the exponential growth, you only need to make 4 in 1 week before you can sit out or take on a different volunteer role if you wish. If all you do is get the message out, people will probably just Google the party name and see a bunch of news articles about racism and how poorly they're doing in the polls and relapse back into dependence on the party they usually vote for. So then what do you do if the moment you mention the PPC they're shutting their door, saying, I don't want anything to do with those alt-right white supremacists, or nope, not gonna split my vote, or I ain't ever voting for another Quebecer? You won't be able to connect if that's what is happening. It doesn't matter how great the platform is or how important the truth is if no one is willing to listen. I've already heard statistics like 50% of the people I tried to talk to wouldn't even listen to me when I said PPC. I'm hearing about people getting shouted down, dragged into arguments. It's all awful and very disappointing. And worst of all, it works to suppress our message and destroy our movement. The solution is simple. Connect first and inform the voter of the truth, and then tell them why you're out volunteering nights away and who you're doing it for. When people believe in something, they are passionate. And when others see that passion, they can believe in it too. So I spent a whole evening, over 4 hours, scouring Elections Canada website, searching hundreds of documents for the words door, door-to-door, knock, canvass, identify, identification, and transparency. And I didn't see a single spot in a training manual or commentary or anything that said, the first words out of your mouth must be your party affiliation. If they were, all that empowered established parties would have to do is exactly what they've done to us. Smear us so we're deemed untouchable. Then we would be censored and unable to gain any ground. The closest I saw was that at some point in your message you need to divulge who you're speaking on behalf of. And that's only if you're an official representative, a member signed up with the party, working with an EDA. If you're just a concerned Canadian who stumbled upon my videos, you can go talk to whomever you want. But, for the sake of integrity and honesty, you most definitely should tell them you're supporting the party, which is why you're promoting it and talking to people in the first place. In another area I read that telephone calls and door-to-door conversations are both considered live exchanges, but not advertising. So if it's not advertising, does it have to contain a mention of the party you represent by law, like on a billboard or poster? Who knows? It doesn't matter because one way or the other, we're going to divulge that we're promoting the party anyway. And if you're partnered with an EDA on behalf of your candidate specifically. Honestly, when you talk to your coworkers or family or friends hoping to enlighten them and persuade them to support the PPC, do you start your conversation off by telling them you're speaking on behalf of the party and hoping their allegiance will be swayed? I hardly think so. If your neighborhood or whole town is threatened by wildfire, do you go from door to door alerting neighbors, starting with, for the sake of community health and safety, on behalf of the municipality and the forestry department, I'd like to inform you. No, you don't. You just tell them, hey, here's the danger we're facing, here's what we gotta do. I don't see any legislation demanding you begin an interaction with a fellow Canadian you just want to convey some truth to regarding politics by stating your party affiliation. I'd say it's safe to say you're permitted to postpone your alliance until partway through your conversation. I myself am not going to lose any sleep over it. So if you're not officially a member and connected to an EDA, it appears you're just a John Q. citizen out walking around telling people who you're supporting. Great. The concepts herein still apply. And if you're a party member and volunteering for the EDA, fine. If they instruct you to divulge your association right off the bat, do so. And if that fails 30% of the time in the first 10 houses, I don't suggest you do that anymore because your message isn't being heard. And at that rate, you'll lose a lot of potential voters. Just know if you admit this strategy to your EDA, you might be seen as rocking the boat. I'm out fighting for freedom. I don't want to start needless conflicts over petty legislative I-dotting and T-crossing. Honestly, those laws about transparency were put in place so that it would be illegal for someone from Party X to go to a door and say they represent Party Y, and then misrepresent Party Y with all manner of ideas that would make the elector avoid Party Y like the plague. I would say that is the spirit of the law, because making the law command you say who you represent during the advertising means you can't lie about who you're representing or you'll face a penalty. Inform the voter. This is where you help the voter realize that the mainline party they're supporting won't be the solution to the issues. This definitely does not mean you lie. It's just the plain truth, as discussed throughout these videos, that a lot of the issues our nation faces won't be solved by these people whose real aim is simply to remain in power in the House of Commons to fulfill whatever their hidden agenda is. This is when you introduce the People's Party of Canada and what they have said directly relating to that issue. We talked earlier about being positive. Some interpret that to mean you don't say a single negative thing about the other parties. That's foolishness. Again, this isn't politics as usual. Some old sport we all take up every 4 or 5 years and have a swell time at. We're talking about the demise of our nation. No, you can be positive about the PPC while cautioning voters that the other parties will fail them just as they always do. Some say this is smearing or mudslinging. Would it be mudslinging to holler out to warn someone driving by that a murderer was in their backseat? Is that defamation of the rear passenger compartment of their automobile? Let's be realistic here, friends. We're talking about our two major parties being in bed with radical Islamists, letting foreign entities have their way with our nation while propelling us along a course to globalism. This is not a sport. This is life and death. By the way, the Quiggin report just tweeted out that the Qatar papers have been released, and they reveal that all major parties, Liberals, Conservatives, and NDP, are involved with Qatar, but not the Greens, and definitely not the PPC. What's really important by being positive is that it is a turnoff to voters to listen to someone bad-mouthing another party like a whiny adolescent. So do guard the tone of the conversation and conduct yourself in a more upbeat way. Keep the focus primarily on how great the People's Party of Canada is and how there are solutions brought about by the leader, Maxime Bernier, and how your candidate is going to be the one to listen to them and look out for your riding. You also don't want to come off as an alarmist, of course. You just have to be sincere about the reality that there is a deep-seated corruption in our government that won't come undone unless a brand new party upsets the whole system and looses the party leaders and many of their MPs from their seats. It can be as simple as kindly inviting them to view the video contents of this resource so they will be informed and aware. You don't even have to go into details. Just encourage them to sacrifice a couple of evenings to visit the site and watch the linked videos. Or you can even jokingly say, "So, have you ever heard the expression being red-pilled?" And if they have, great. And if they don't know what that means, you can explain it. But this is a know your audience sort of thing. You're not going to ask an 80-year-old woman this. You'll ask a Gen Xer or a millennial. I think you get the idea. Then you can say, well, this is quite the truth bomb. And it's unsettling, but it's really, really important that all Canadians be made aware of the information on this site and understand what's going on so we vote out the wrong parties and in the right party. Then comes the encouragement that we have the solution. The brand new party filled with regular Canadians just like us who are tired of the status quo. This is being positive. Gain a voter. Thanks to this common sense approach, it becomes clear the PPC is the party to vote for. Furthermore, because you've exposed how the other parties won't meet that desire, they'll know they really have to get on board and investigate. Recruit a volunteer. Now is when you have the opportunity to invite them to join you, get trained, and do the same. Help them understand how easy it is, how you or someone else from your network of door knockers will be with them, and how fast this grows if everyone gets on board. I suggest a word picture to help them see that they must assist in some capacity. Sharing the information and alerting others is the obvious choice here. We'll go through that in the example later. At the very least, you can encourage them to read up on the entire platform, watch the videos, and then call their family and close friends to get informed, then use the less invasive Facebook to share the same message with their dozens and hundreds of acquaintances across Canada via direct private messages, and try to sacrifice a little time each day seeing what their candidate, the EDA, Maxime Bernier, and the PPC's official social media platforms are saying, and share that via social media to others while admitting they are for the PPC. If you're carrying around one of the policy comparison charts, you can point out those social media links on the back side. If they think they'd like to train, you can get their contact info or leave your own for them to contact you when they're ready. Obviously, the first is easier to follow up on and encourage them, as the prospect of going door to door can be nerve-wracking. Garner support. Here's where you can insert that the candidate could use some funds for the campaign, divulging, as we said earlier, that a modest grassroots campaign can cost $15,000 to $21,000. So if they're able, it's easy to donate via their EDA page, or at least contact the EDA to find out how to donate, and that donations return a tax receipt. You can ask if they'd like a sign. You can ask if they'd like to become a member. Try to do what your EDA has requested you to do. Or if you're off doing this yourself, well, then you don't need to be quite as formal. Finish with a poll. This is your chance to garner unofficial polling data. Official polling has to be registered, and the legislation is quite burdensome, but this isn't official in any way, shape, or form. We're not getting much time in the polls because we're being censored and suppressed. But if you talk to 100 people in a week, and you finish by asking them to participate in a one-question poll as to where their support for the PPC now is, so you can report that to your network, you'll be able to share the mood developing in your riding, and this will sway more support and encourage others. I suggest letting them know you're trying to collect data for an unofficial poll to see how this is going. Tell them in a friendly tone that you won't take it personally, but for curiosity's sake, and they are free to respond however they want. Give them the options. I am definitely going to vote PPC now. The PPC sounds very favorable. I'll have to look into them more. I'm still indifferent to voting. It's interesting, but I'm not really swayed. And I'm definitely not voting PPC. I'll vote for my other party. Tick off what they select as well as a total count so you know how many people have participated. Then you can go home, open Windows Paint program, load up an image affiliated with the party, and enter your polling data on it. My experience. When I was done talking to over 50 or so people, connecting with them, hearing what they were concerned with, informing them the positions of the mainstream parties would let them down, then telling them about the PPC having the answers, then discussing briefly the corruption in the system and our amazing chance to start fresh, roughly 80% of people were very positive and saying, I really have to look into this party. Half of those were saying, I think I'm going to support the PPC. Why? They saw they needed to make the choice and that there was only one option. I only had 3 people get agitated, and not because I was pushing them, but because I said I was promoting Maxime Bernier. They all wanted to get Trudeau out at any cost, even voting for Trudeau Light, Andrew Scheer. 2 said, we can't split the vote. And the other said, I'll never vote for another Quebecer again. And he couldn't even be reasoned with when hearing Max has been called the Albertan from Quebec for over 10 years thanks to his free market ideas. Connect the volunteer with the EDA. If the person wanted to volunteer with them, you can pass that contact info on to the volunteer coordinator. Short of that, you keep a contact list of who you're connecting with and who wants to be trained, and you make a list using Google Maps of the places you're hitting all over town. People report to you where they want to go, you write them down, and you don't door knock the same place twice until the whole riding is done once. Ideally, you can use an online shared document or your volunteer coordinator as a dispatch system so your MP knows when and where people are so they can connect with them via phone and meet up to knock on doors together. The beauty is, with 10 people doing this the first week, you knock on 1,000 doors. The second week, 4,000 more doors are knocked on. In the third week, 16,000 more doors get knocked on. In the fourth week, 64,000 doors are knocked on. But as we already said, a riding has an average of 35,000 doors. So by this point, people are being contacted a second time about the PPC. The flurry of activity itself tells them this party is a real movement. Lawn signs popping up everywhere, people walking all over promoting the party, people talking about it at work, with friends, everybody sharing on social media. By the end of the 5th week and into the middle of the 6th week, doors will have been knocked on 3 or 4 times. Train to replicate. Training to replicate doesn't have to be complicated. They watch this video, they meet up with you, and you role play 3 times, each time getting progressively more difficult. First time, passive, easy listener, very intrigued. Second, a little more guarded and wary, asking some tough questions. Third time, somewhat belligerent or argumentative, and then always reassuring them that it will all be fine, and this is just for training. Then you go out, and they just stand there and smile while you do the first few houses. And when they're ready and willing, they take over and you jump in when need be, answering questions they're unsure of, etc., and give them positive feedback and critiquing in between houses. By the end of the night, they'll be ready to do it without you, and ideally with another new team member. You've made at least 4 recruits in a week, so they can all work together. Honestly, I'm no sales specialist. I've never done this before. I just knew it had to be done, so I went out, and it went well. I know it will go well for you too. You just have to go. There's too much at stake not to. An example. Hi there, I'm John, and I'm going around the neighborhood seeing what people are thinking about this upcoming federal election. What issues concern you the most? Well, pipelines are one. And who do you think will ensure we get those pipelines? The Conservative Party and Scheer. Okay, and have you heard them talk about their strategy? How they're going to do it? No, not exactly. But I've seen an article where they said they would make it happen. Or maybe they'll say, yeah, they're going to make an energy corridor across the nation and every province will get to put resources in it. Oh, that's interesting. Are there other issues? Well, yeah. And they go on to describe those other issues, and you repeat the process, asking them who's going to fix it and how they've said they're going to do it. Then you tell the truth about all those solutions and why, if true, it won't happen. Well, a friend showed me a website with a list of videos, and in them it actually helped me understand how that promise isn't real or how it won't work. You see, Andrew Scheer, while in Alberta, promises he'll make pipelines happen no matter what. But while in Quebec, he speaks with a very soft tone about how he'll consult with the premier of the province and hope they can come to a compromise. This is because he doesn't want to upset Quebec voters. He also says the energy corridor is going to entice Quebec's premier to allow Albertan pipelines through by arranging the sale of hydroelectricity between Quebec and Ontario via the energy corridor. But Ontario doesn't want to buy the energy from Quebec. So obviously he's lying, or he's going to fail on this issue because he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know what, though? I've got good news. There is a party and a leader that has a solution and has talked about it the same both in Alberta and in Quebec. Would you like to hear about this? Yeah, sure. Maxime of the People's Party of Canada has stated repeatedly he would use the Canadian Constitution Section 9210, which basically states that when something is advantageous to all of the country, like economic prosperity by getting our natural resources to the marketplace, the federal government has jurisdiction to impose that on a province regardless of what the premier thinks. And Bernier has said this both in Alberta and in Quebec, just the same. And it angered many people in Quebec, but just as many understand, pipelines are safer than transport by rail due to an awful tragedy that happened in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, when a train carrying crude oil rolled down a hill, resulting in a fire and explosion that killed 47 people. And they were in favor of it. It's part of the PPC platform, and they'll get it done. Let me point you to some resources so you can see just how great their platform is and why Canada needs this party now more than ever. They may still be reluctant because of splitting the vote or because he's a Quebecer, but at least now they're more open to having the conversation. They know the party and leader they were relying on, like most Canadians, is no longer very reliable, so they must seek out an alternative, and that's the PPC. If you're comfortable, you can tackle those empty arguments, or just direct them here to see the videos tackling those issues. I should add, I hid my door hangers under a clipboard and only presented them one at a time once I was introducing Max and the party because I didn't want their presence to cause any resistance. Once the conversation has gone well and the person is quite intrigued, even positive towards the PPC, hopefully sounding quite on board, without getting too dramatic, you leave them with a word picture. Imagine you're on a ship and it's sinking. It can be sinking fast or sinking slow. It doesn't matter, but it will inevitably capsize into the freezing Atlantic. But a rescue chopper flies over and drops you a rope ladder. What would you do? Well, I'd grab that ladder, I guess. Right, you would. Now, what if on that ship were your loved ones, your neighbors, your coworkers? Then what would you do? At this point, it could go either way, but you can coax them back to the correct answer. I'd help them get on too. Exactly, you would. The thing is, this ship is our nation. And like all great nations throughout ancient history, we're on a downward trajectory. But we have a way out. This election only, a grassroots movement which will reboot the parliamentary system and get us back on track. But it needs your help. It needs people to spread the message. It needs volunteers. It needs door knockers. It could use some donors too, but money is the least important. We'll even train you. Do you think that would be helpful? And if they're fairly serious, they'll hopefully say yes, and you give them the contact info. Ideally, you have them door knock with you as soon as possible, after they've been caught up to speed on the platform enough to be familiar and point back to it. They don't need all the answers, just that familiarity to point others back to the resources, so that by next week, they're out on their own sharing with other people. And that's how simple it is. And you can add this with everything else we've discussed here. Some final thoughts. I learned while searching Elections Canada that you can't be restricted entrance from apartments in gated communities between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Apartments have a lot of doors very close. I'd suggest getting into them ASAP. Obviously, this initiative uses Canadians for PPC Blogspot as a resource. There you can find printable policy comparison charts, which you can customize at your leisure, then carry those around with you. There's also a business card template, so you can be directing people to this resource on the fly, whether you're in a lineup at the bank or a grocery store lineup. It's about getting out of that comfort zone and trying to warn people Canada's future is not looking good. There's also official links and social media accounts and other social media links to those providing excellent points and commentary this election. I also want to take a moment to caution a lot of people out there about something many think is a viable means for winning this election. Social media isn't going to succeed alone. The turnover rate is way too low. I had one person try to tell me it works because they'd been able to convince 5 people to support the PPC. I'm glad for them, but after months of posting, that is not nearly quick enough, especially with the vote not far away. One thing that happens in Facebook, thanks to how the algorithms determine what friends see your timeline, if you've been posting about the PPC and those friends aren't interested, soon you aren't in their newsfeed anymore. You drift off into oblivion. But you keep showing up in the newsfeeds of friends who also support Maxime Bernier because they have been liking all your posts. It just becomes an echo chamber where you're only hearing each other's voices, and the info circulates and never gets out. Haven't you noticed you really only see the same 25 friends on Facebook? It's the same for them too. I've also unfortunately noticed that with all the PPC fan pages out there, a lot of the same members are on all of them, and a lot of the same people commenting on one are the same as on another. We won't win this way. We must get the message out. If you aren't housebound, you really need to consider getting out there to doorknock. We also can't rely on debates to win. For one, if we sit back and Bernier isn't allowed in, we'll have just wasted several weeks. And even if he gets in and does well, people need to see others telling them, this is a big movement. I'm supporting him. You're not throwing away your vote if this debate convinced you to support him, and you're not just splitting the vote either. Everyone is voting for him. In 2011, only 14 million people tuned in to watch the debates, and in 2015, it was even less. That's about half the number of voters. Even if Bernier had a good showing, would more than 35% of Canadians now want to vote for the party to win? I doubt it. People need to see a wave is coming, an authentic grassroots movement that they can join and be a part of to save Canada. The most comfortable start will be to phone call the people you are well acquainted with to discuss the upcoming election and to direct them to canadiansforppc.blogspot.com. This is like door knocking via the phone, but so much more beneficial than cold calling strangers or those you're not well acquainted with. These people trust you and will likely be quick to listen to you as you tell them the truth of our situation. As soon as this video is up, it's go time, and I'm making my calls. For those you're less acquainted with, a generalized message via Facebook would be easy, not too intrusive, and may bear a little fruit. Perhaps say, the election's coming up and I'm really concerned about the usual parties. Someone showed me this website, canadiansforppc.blogspot.com, and I think you should have a look. Please tell me what you think. Done. And again, once this video is uploaded, I'm going to start hammering away to get the info out. If you've watched through this series, specifically video 1, you know our nation is in trouble and needs a drastic course correction. Conclusion. In any case, there's 2 approaches. Follow every command of an EDA and wait on them for everything, or just go out and get the job done. We only have 7 weeks, and it takes 6 weeks if you're only making 4 recruits a week. But I think you'll make more. No time to procrastinate or drag feet. The second option is very guerrilla warfare-like, but I do believe it will be effective in creating an unstoppable wave that has so much momentum it spreads out from every riding and across this nation. Once the wave has some momentum, then pass your recruits off to the EDA to help them. It's not enough for us to try and get 6 or a dozen seats. With the state this nation is in, if we don't win, we may not be able to fend off the encroaching corruption, censorship, and information suppression by the media to even win those seats back next election, let alone ever form the government. If we get bold and focused and get out there with the truth, in the end, we will be victorious. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos in this series. All sources used have links in the description below, and all compatible videos can also be found in a playlist within this channel, link below. The complete list of videos in this series for the upcoming election can be found at canadiansforppc.blogspot.com. You can also follow Maxime Bernier on social media via these different platforms. Check out the official PPC website at peoplespartyofcanada.ca. If you want to support the party, you can volunteer with your local candidate and EDA or Electoral District Association and donate directly to them if able. Going door to door with this information and training other concerned Canadians to do likewise will be most beneficial, as this is a genuine grassroots movement. And if you believe in the power of prayer, please do be praying for our leaders and our nation. Thank you, and God bless Canada.